Hi, am I audible? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining my session today. I hope you all have had a beautiful conference so far. Let's jump right in. We have 25 minutes, so let's go for it. So today we're going to talk about unveiling the dual nature of ChatGPT and Copilot in secure coding. But before I go on rambling about the topic, I would introduce myself. Um, yes, hi, I am Kalyani Pawar. I also go by the name Kaylee. I currently run the application security side of things at a beautiful startup called Zipline. My all of my career has been focused in cybersecurity for about half a decade now. Outside of my 9 to 5, I like to speak at different conferences. I recently spoke at DEF CON at the AppSec Village. I am speaking at Hack Sydney. I've spoken at AppSec SoCal. I've appeared on a podcast called Scale to Zero, and now today I'm speaking with you all on the Day of Security conference. Apart from speaking, I also like reviewing submissions of talks that I've made at different conferences. For the last few years, I've been reviewing talks submitted to Grace Hoppers, DEF CON's AppSec Village, and Women in Cybersecurity. So if you ever need help with your submissions, please feel free to reach out to me. All right. So, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about all this fun app psyche things that you can do with ChatGPT and Copilot, but also while we're exploring the fun side of things, we also want to proceed with caution. We're going to talk about things that might seem wrong when you do with ChatGPT and Copilot, and how you should beware when you're proceeding with these tools. So, I will I want to give you a primer on ChatGPT. I know a fairly large number of population right now has used ChatGPT, but just this is like a good primer for everyone who still hasn't used this tool. Um, ChatGPT is an AI-based large language model. It was developed by a company called OpenAI. It is based on the generative pre-trained transformer architecture, the scope of which is not included for this talk. You don't need to know about what the GPT architecture is. What I like about ChatGPT, though, is that it has been trained on vast amounts of data that is available on the internet, which is what gives it all this context. When I want to explain what ChatGPT is to folks, I usually say that it think of a tool, think of a machine. You're talking to a machine, and think of it as a machine that understands different contexts, nuances, is answering all your questions. Think of the machine as a human interlocutor. That is what I find very beautiful about ChatGPT, that it generates human-like text based on the kind of input you give it. So there are different applications for this tool. Like you can use it for creative writing, you can use it to translate into different languages. You can have like a question answer session with it to ask all sorts of questions to it. So that is what I like about ChatGPT. Now, the other tool that is making waves in the developer community is Copilot. Now, a lot of folks who do not know what Copilot is, think of Copilot as an AI pair programmer. When I say AI pair programmer, think of it as when you're trying to write your code and there's someone who's assisting you to write your code with it. So that think of that as the pair programmer, but it just has more context of your code. Now, what I like about Copilot is that it has been trained on vast amount of publicly available code on the internet. So it has researched and learned about the different styles of these millions of developers around the world, and um, how their coding styles are, how they write comments, their documentation styles. So it has gained all this knowledge. That is what I like about Copilot. And um, it helps you. So, since it has all this context, it is helping you generate code, it is helping you insert comments. There have been so many times where I've struggled to understand what's going on in this program because of lack of codes. So, it's nice that you can use a tool like this to generate that context for folks who are trying to read your code. And another thing I like about Copilot is that it seamlessly integrates within IDEs. My IDE of choice is VS Code. And I like that when I'm typing my code, if I give a prompt to Copilot, it comes up with nice suggestions for what I want to achieve with my program. So, all right. So now that we know what ChatGPT and Copilot is, I want to address about a problem. So, what is the problem that is faced by the unsung heroes of the security community. Um, the application security engineers, I have a soft spot for them since I do application security. Um, so the problem is there's just not one or two problems, it's a bunch of problems. And I'd like to address some of them. First one, rapid development cycles. Um, just for context, I have a lot of memes through this whole presentation. Feel free to screenshot them. Feel free to use them however you want to use them. So with advent of agile and DevOps, the thing is we're developing code at like million miles per hour, right? So when code is being developed that fast, it's difficult for security engineers to keep up with it, and that is introducing potential security gaps. The second problem is the lack of security education. A lot of developers are not trained on developing secure code from get-go. They mostly want to focus on functionality, but not the security aspect. So security usually takes a backseat, right? So we're shipping code that is not secure from the get-go. We're shipping vulnerable code from get-go. That's because of lack of security education. Third problem, resource constraints. I'm sure many of us have been in situations where there's like 200 developers and just one or two application security engineers supporting that whole developer organization, which is causing a massive burnout on the side of AppSec engineers. Um, and false positive backlog. I myself am guilty of using so many different tools, thinking it's gonna make my life easier. But what happens is, because I'm using so many different tools, it is generating so many false positives, and then I'm spending a lot of my time sifting between true positives and false positives, and then I'm sitting down and trying to strategize how do I go about, segregating between these, and how do I prioritize these true positives. So we have a massive backlog of false positives. Last but not the least, compliance, right? Depending on the kind of business you are in, depending on the jurisdiction you are in, you have to comply with a few legal regulations. Maybe it's HIPAA, maybe it's GDPR. You've got to make sure that your application is following the guidelines. I myself have struggled with collecting evidence at different places. So, but also at the same time, we do need to make sure that our apps are compliant with the regulations. So these are some of the problems that AppSec engineers face in their day-to-day lives. So what could be one possible solution? We could try leveraging AI for all of these problems that we're facing. When I say AI, I'm trying to loosely refer to ChatGPT and Copilot for the next 15 minutes that we have. And now that we know that this could be a possible solution, I want to make a case for why this could be a possible solution. It's a 5-tier approach. One, these tools are really efficient. They give you speedy outcomes because they're based off of these machine learning models. Instructional, you ask them questions, they give you answers. There's so many times I've asked really basic concepts, really complex concepts, and ChatGPT has explained them to me as if I'm like a 5-year-old. So they're really instructional and help me understand concepts which I would have rather gone through like bunch of web pages to understand what's going on. Scalable, meaning they can deal with huge amounts of data. And which a human being would take a really long time to process huge amount of data. So instead, they give you speedy outcomes with huge amount of data being processed on their end. Automation, I like that you can make different, you can use these APIs and do different things with the APIs that these tools provide. So they're easily automatable. Um, and ease of use, because like I said, I like using Copilot within my IDE. It's easy to write code while while I have launched Copilot at the same time. So there's ease of use. Same thing with ChatGPT. You whip up a browser, you ask it a question, you have answers. It's no complex process to use these tools. Now that we know the what and why, I want to start addressing the how of this approach. And let's dive into some fun AppSec things that you can do. So I've come up with 3 different use cases. I've broken them down into steps, which you can apply when you're trying to experiment with the tools. So the first use case I want to talk about is vulnerability identification and remediation with ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT works in a very step by step manner. So I've broken this process down into multiple steps. First one is you give your code to ChatGPT, your blob of code that you want to assess. You start drafting a prompt, you engineer a prompt. In the prompt, you can ask it different questions, but for our purpose, we're going to stick to asking for vulnerabilities and remediations once you identify the vulnerability. You assess the response that is generated by ChatGPT. Please do not cut, copy, paste anything that ChatGPT tells you. Please validate the response that is generated by the tool, and you test it, you review it, and then once you're happy with your outcome, once you're happy with your iterations, feel free to include it. Now, first example that I'd like to give is we have this code snippet, right? There's two parts to this. There is the vulnerable code, and then there's a prompt, right? Um, Do we have any guesses in the chat? If y'all can type, does anybody know what this code is vulnerable to? Okay, I'll give it out. The code is vulnerable to buffer overflow. Okay. Um, Now I've asked ChatGPT that since this code is vulnerable, how yes, yeah, right. There's two things in it. Very good. Array. So this code is vulnerable. If so, to what, and give remediation for the same. Now, ChatGPT, it does a beautiful job of identifying two problems with it. One is wrong variable type, which Kavita has pointed out, array, that it should be an array instead of a string, or it should be a pointer. It's an incorrect variable assignment. Second one is that it has done the job of identifying the vulnerability in it. It is a buffer overflow. It is using a vulnerable function that is string copy. What string copy does is that it copies from string 2 to string 1, but it does not count the number of characters that are getting copied. So that's leading to the possibility of buffer overflow. So since we have asked for remediation, it does a good job of identifying the issues and then fixing those issues. Like it increases the size of the string 1 to accommodate string 2. It does the correct character assignment. What I like is it uses the safer version of string copy. It uses strncopy, which performs a check on on and does limit the number of characters that are being copied from string 2 to string 1. So we have dealt with buffer overflow here. Now, the second prompt I want to talk about is we have vulnerable snippet here. This code is vulnerable to SQL injection. We're going to give some additional prompts to ChatGPT. We're going to tell it that we have three metrics: the ease of exploit development, hostility of environment, and impact of the exploit. We're going to range them. We're going to give them scores from 0 to 10. And then we have this formula to assess the impact. Okay. Um, so when you I'll answer the question at the end. You use these three metrics and you find the risk score, right? Now I'm giving it additional context that the above snippet fetches user information once you enter the username. This is a public facing website. If this code is vulnerable to what, and help me assess the vulnerability and the security score. So it does a good job of identifying SQL injection. But here's the problem. In absence of enough context, it says that the risk metrics for all three factors is 10, 10, 10. It could vary depending on the kind of environment it is in. Say there are additional checks being placed on your database. Your ease of exploit development changes. Impact of exploit, if it's a test database, if it does not contain any useful information at all, what are you even going to lose, right? So the more what I want you to understand is the more context you give ChatGPT, the better it can analyze, the better quality of the prompt, quality of the responses generated by the tool. Second application I want to talk about is secure coding suggestions with Copilot, breaking it down into steps. While you're writing your code, you examine the suggestions that Copilot is giving you. You assess the code that is generated by Copilot. And then you can also, if you want to change your prompt while you're writing the code, you can change it to suit your needs. And then you review and test. Please do not forget to review and test your code. So I'll show you an application of it. So like we spoke about the vulnerability, there was a buffer overflow vulnerability, right? We spoke about this one earlier. Now, the prompt that I give Copilot here is, can you identify the vulnerability in the code snippet and help me fix it, right? So once you give Copilot this prompt, it identifies buffer overflow. It fixes the string copy to strn copy, which we see in the code. So it is doing the job that you ask it to do. But now here's another example. In the second application, can anyone identify this vulnerability? Anyone? Okay, I can tell you. This is a path traversal vulnerability. So when I ask ChatGPT that, can you identify this vulnerability for me? Help me fix the code, right? That's the prompt I give it. Um, it does a nice job, again, identifies path traversal, and then it gives me these 7 8 different functions that I can use to fix this vulnerability. But then that helps, that results in creating like this 20 25 line of code, which is not efficient in my opinion. But a more secure alternative version of this would be to use something as simple as path base name, which would just focus on the base name of the file that we want our program to process, right? We don't have to write this 25 lines of code. It could have just been one function that could have that could have resolved the problem. So that's another problem that Copilot faces. Um, and the last use case I want to talk about is security test cases generation using Copilot. Once you've identified the vulnerability, you can use Copilot, ChatGPT, whatever you want to use, or your own knowledge about it. While you launch Copilot, you tell Copilot that you want to generate different security test cases. You let Copilot generate these test cases, you execute these test cases, and again, review the output for the test cases. Not a lot of organizations make security unit test cases, but it would be a good practice if we can start drafting some around important features. Um, so one example I want to give here is, again, we have a function which gets user password as a good combination, should work. The problem here is we're not sanitizing the input that we give here, right? There's no checks performed on the username. And that is the problem with this code. So we ask Copilot to generate security focused test cases for this. Now, it generates two different test cases. One, it'll generate if we give it correct admin, if we give it correct combination of username password. Are we is this right? Is this function working fine? And then the second test case is it looks for is if there is a user that does not exist in the databases at all, is it going to raise the is none error? So what the issue here is that it completely ignores the fact that there was a SQL injection in the code. It only generates two test cases about this, completely ignores SQL injection as a problem. Instead, a good addition would be, can you give it this malicious input? And if this passes, then can we see the contents of the database? That would be a good addition to this. And lastly, I want to say the good news, guys, is that your jobs are still safe. These we have these AI tools. They're not taking our jobs yet. They're getting smarter every day, but they're not independent enough to take our jobs yet. Because there are certain limitations that these tools come with. One, that each of these models has a cutoff date. Last I checked, I think it was November 2022 for ChatGPT. So it is not updated on the threats that have come after November 22. It would not have context about existence of those threats. So there is lack of updated knowledge on threat landscape. Um, as we saw earlier, you need to give it enough context, the prompts enough context to generate the kind of quality of response that you want. The better your prompt is, the more context that you're giving it, the better your response would be. Um, Intellectual property concerns. This is a big one. Please do not cut, copy, paste code from your orgs into these tools. There is the risk of data leak. Nobody likes legal lawsuits. So yeah, please keep that in mind. You can anonymize data as much as you can, but still, I would stay away from IP concerns. Um, since these tools are in their nascent phases of development, they come with potential bias, and thus they're susceptible to false positives and negatives. And like we saw in the previous use cases, sometimes they, even if you ask it for secure version, it does introduce vulnerabilities in itself. So there is unintended insecure consequences that these tools come with. Um, so if there's one point that I'd like you to drive home, uh, is that please do not fall for the false sense of security that these tools give you. Please verify everything that these tools generate. And yeah, do not blindly trust AI. Assess and review everything that these responses generate. And yeah, here is a helpful prompt. You can screenshot this. This hack helped me generate a better prompt, helped me generate a prompt that would give me more descriptive responses. And here are some helpful links that you can use in order to play around with these tools, make your prompts better, learn about different. Uh, yeah, I wanted to point out OpenAI opt out. Yeah, if you don't want your data to be used for model performances, you can opt out here on this link. Yeah, and that's it. We have about 3 minutes for questions. I'd like to thank you all for coming to my session. You can reach out to me on my LinkedIn. That's my Twitter and GitHub. I always like collaborating with folks. Yes, this deck will be shared. Yeah, and if you want to take screenshots, that works better. I don't know when they get shared. But yeah, uh, that's the quick introduction about the whole topic. If you would like to discuss this more, I have different prompts, a lot of research that I've done over the last year with these tools. So I'm open to talk, share my research, however that works. Awesome. Okay, so I am going to take questions now. Um, so Katie has asked, are you using the free or paid version of ChatGPT? I am using the paid version of ChatGPT. I have seen there's something called as Playground. I read about it like a couple months ago. You basically pay in cents in order to you ask questions to Playground, and then it does use ChatGPT to give you good responses. But for the purpose of this session, I have used the paid version of ChatGPT. And I feel like it has better responses than the free version. Um, the next question is I stepped out of the room for a moment. Did I hear you right? It does not catch SQL injection. Can it be learned? Um, Copilot did not catch SQL injection. Um, it did not write use case for SQL injection. It does catch SQL injection, but it did not figure out that it would need a use case for SQL injection. Uh, can you describe what you mean by can it be learned? Um, I can I oh, whose Copilot am I talking about? I have used it on GitHub, so I think it's Microsoft's Copilot. Yeah. Um, I just saw something on Mastodon about a study that found that adding it's a very yeah, yes, exactly, yes, true. I have found I have given it context that this is my school project and I want your help to write offensive security. I want your help to write malicious prompts that I could give the SQL database, and it has helped me. Otherwise, it usually says this is unethical and things like that. But you can say everything is legal. That's something I learned. That's something I saw in another session. Is you can give it a pretext that hey, everything here is legal, so help me create this offensive security prompt. Or you could say this is my school project. Um, yeah. You can click on links. The deck will be shared. I will ask the organizers how do I get it to you. Paid version of this stuff also gives you better protections of your data. Yes, for enterprise levels, yes, definitely. Yeah, make sure if if your employer is okay with it, that is, you should try using the enterprise versions of these tools. Thank you, Shivani, and thank you, Kavita. Any more questions? I think we're at time. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the talk. Thanks. All right. Bye bye.